A weather-worn house stands at the edge of the Whitepine woods. Its silhouette was swallowed by branches, twisted like reaching hands. The roof sags under years of rain and rot, shingles curling like dried leaves. Wind moves through the trees but never seems to touch the house. The air here is still, full of something unspoken. Windows stare blankly from the house like dead eyes. Behind them, curtains hang motionless, and a pair of two eyes glare into the woods, silent and composed. In the basement, an old piano sits beneath a bare bulb. No one has touched it in years, but sometimes at night, a single key presses down.
Say, how about we treat you to lunch?
Have you ever wondered about why in Whitepine there are so many scenes with silent atmosphere? Maybe you've given a thought to why in Passerine by Blue Jamas, Tommy was so fond of yellow flowers. Or perhaps you've pondered on the deeper significance of the spinning top in Christopher Nolan's Inception. These aren't just random elements thrown into the mix to make the story intriguing. They're symbols, powerful tools that the authors and filmmakers use to convey profound meanings subtly yet impactfully. Uncovering the types of symbolism that often go unnoticed, yet hold the power to transform a simple tale into an unforgettable masterpiece is nothing short of one giant artist's task. But right now, we will try our best to interpret our favorite fiction as much as we can. Delve into the world of Whitepine and find out why the silent scenes are enriched of symbols and meaning, carrying a greater weight than the thriller-full, blood-pumping events. Understand what it means to mark and learn how subtle or significant changes convert a tale into something we've never seen before. The word symbolism originates from the word symbol, which itself comes from the Latin symbolum, and symbolon in Greek. In ancient Greece, symbolon referred to a token or a sign of recognition, often a broken object that when reunited, signified an agreement or understanding. It's easy to say what symbolism is, but in cinematography and storytelling, the word symbolism alters into something that is far more compound. To put it short, symbolism can be defined as the practice of assigning an object or action with multiple layers of meaning within a narrative. These layers may not be immediately obvious, but they become more apparent as the story progresses. The symbolic object or an action holds a meaning that goes beyond its literal definition. Symbolism plays a crucial role in adding depth to a narrative. Consider the process of writing a screenplay. It would be tedious for both the writer and the viewers if every element's significance had to be explicitly explained. Take Passerine by Blue Jamas. The characters don't need to constantly identify who the heroes and the villains are. Symbolism is abundant and easily discernible by the audience. When the Green Army invaded the land of Wilbur and his brother Tommy, it's not specifically said in the story that the bad guys are in green because the symbolic object in this scenario is the costumes of the invaders themselves. Being semi-associated with Dream from the Dream SMP, it's not necessarily hard to interpret that here the color green represents war, uneasiness, and not being in the state of liberality. This visual dichotomy symbolizes the classic battle between light and darkness, a theme that readers grasp without needing a verbal confirmation. Furthermore, symbolism serves to underscore the key concepts that the narrative wants to imprint on its audience. In the Harry Potter franchise, the protagonist bears a scar on his forehead, a remnant of an attack by a malevolent wizard during his infancy. As Harry matures, the pain in his scar signals the proximity of the antagonist. This ability of the villain to inflict pain on the protagonist without being physically present symbolizes his potent threat. This also could well be interpreted towards Whitepine. In Whitepine, our protagonist Ivory bears what seems to be a red pinkish scar that stems from the upper right side of her face, covering her eye fully to the elbow of her right arm. This very deliberate use of attribute in her appearance builds up strong suspicion in theories revolving around her red scar, as it is spreading and covering more and more of her arm each episode. This could be preserved and assumed by the audience as simple as an accident that happened in the past, or something as serious as the scar being given by her alter ego in her unlisted series of videos. The importance of symbolism in storytelling and in cinema is very, very much abundant. In cinematography, film and TV are visual mediums and thus lend themselves to tangible symbols that drive home the theme of the story. Unlike written narratives, filmmakers can utilize their visual skills and abilities to further enhance the character's psychology and the depth of the story itself. Effective symbolism balances subtlety with clarity. Symbols should be noticeable enough to be interpreted, but not so obvious that they lose their impact. The way a symbol is presented, its context, timing, and visual representation significantly impacts its meaning and effectiveness, which is something that the written art forms can work around and adapt it to their own way very delicately. Symbolism in literature is crucial because it allows authors to convey deeper, more complex meanings beyond the literal text. It adds layers of interpretation, enriching the reader's experience and prompting them to engage more actively with the narrative. By using objects, characters, or even events to represent abstract ideas or emotions, symbolism enhances the story's impact and allows for nuanced exploration of themes. And it's the reason why readers tend to remember what they read, as opposed to film viewers. Cinematic symbolism is the use of how a story is shot to shape. This includes framing, lighting, camera angles, movement, negative space, and stillness. In Whitepine, silence and static shots are heavy with meaning. Long, unmoving frames of doorways or empty rooms force the viewer to feel the weight of presence through absence. Something's missing, but we're never told what it is, and that feeling becomes a part of the story. Take, for example, the repeated shots of hallways in the Hemlock Mansion. They're dim, symmetrical, almost like tunnels, suggesting a journey inward into memory or perhaps into guilt. And these shots linger just long enough to feel uncomfortable. They dare the viewer to notice something not there. Although not exactly the same, techniques that make the viewer feel at unease isn't a new phenomenon. In stop-motion animated movie Coraline, director Henry Selick used tilted camera angles whenever the other world began to unravel. These slanted frames gave a subconscious sense of imbalance, subtly telling the audience something's wrong even before the characters realize it. The same trick is at play in Whitepine, but in an even quieter way. A sudden off-center framing, a handheld sway, or the camera slowly pulling away from a character. Each movement speaks to the emotional decay of the world inside the house. Characters in visual storytelling often carry more than personality or plot. They carry meaning. When used symbolically, a character can represent a mindset, a memory, a fear, or even an entire emotional condition. In Whitepine, characters aren't always meant to feel like fully fleshed out individuals. They're often presented as fragmented, not due to lack of development, but because they're shaped by the emotional landscape of the story. Their behavior is subdued. Their silence is deliberate. Their presence in a frame says more than their dialogue ever could. This is character symbolism at work. Instead of clear arcs, we get representations. Someone who always cleans, perhaps clinging to control. Another who avoids eye contact, embodying emotional withdrawal. These aren't just quirks. They're expressions of what the character can't articulate. Whitepine speaks in visual metaphor, and its characters are the philosophers. For instance, Soraptor, presumably the most impactful character in relation to Ivory, is portrayed as a deeply grounded, sincere presence. His warmth and patience make him feel like a protective figure, even as the story grows darker. The moment at the end of episode 3, where he opens up about his sister's passing, isn't just emotional, but thematic. His reflection on mourning and his quiet insistence that moving forward is the only honest choice becomes a symbolic anchor. He represents acceptance, the hardest and often final phase of grief. And through him, the story gently reminds us holding on to pain doesn't keep someone alive, it keeps us stuck. A strong example of a looked down on symbolic character is the Hemlock. He's a young boy with an endearing heart, thrill-seeking energy, constantly pushing against the cautious world his father, Zombie Hemlock, has built around him. Their dynamic peaks in the moment where V snaps, "I'm not a kid," capturing the frustration of a boy desperate to be seen as an independent. V symbolizes the universal desire for liberation and self-definition, something that resonates especially with younger audiences drawn to stories of rebellion and self-assertion. In character symbolism, the antagonist often embodies pain, pressure, or a force that disrupts the protagonist's life. As old as storytelling itself, Whitepine follows this tradition with Detective Prometheus, who clearly represents the looming threat of judgment and suspicion. His quiet pursuit of Ivory, watching her every move, makes his presence feel inescapable. It's not hard to read his fixation as a symbolic weight pressuring on her, the living embodiment of guilt and scrutiny following the tragic accident that closed the first episode. Although very much unmistakable, we see quite glimpse of his selfishness and egoisticality, further securing his place as the main villain of the story so far. And perhaps the saddest character to observe is Kanji. His story radiates hopelessness, and his soft, trembling voice carries the weight of anxiety and fear. His inability to pay for his father's medical care, culminating in the painful moment where he is forced to borrow money from Zombie Hemlock, is devastating. When that help still isn't enough, the sight of his reaction and the sound of his mournful, stifled cries becomes one of Whitepine's most heartbreaking sequences. Kanji symbolizes the crushing weight of powerlessness and the quiet despair of being trapped by circumstances that you can't escape. Even supporting roles follow this symbolic logic. Some characters may appear emotionally stiff, overly friendly, or eerily neutral, all parts of how Whitepine builds a world that feels faintly off. The people around the protagonist don't always feel real because they're not meant to. They reflect the internal state of the characters, the way grief or cope distorts perception. So while traditional stories ask how a character changes, symbolic ones ask what a character stands for. In Whitepine, characters operate like memory, incomplete, inconsistent, and painfully honest. And that's what makes them also genuine and real. Music in visual storytelling is never just background noise. It is an invisible character. It can whisper the truth before a character does, or speak the feelings that dialogue leaves unsaid. In a series like Whitepine, where silence and restraint dominate, music takes on a symbolic role. The score of Whitepine is sparse and deliberate. There are long stretches of near silence where the hum of a light bulb or the creak of a floorboards feel louder than any orchestra could. This emptiness isn't accidental. It symbolizes the isolation of the characters and the suffocating stillness of their world. When music does appear, it's almost ghostly. Soft piano notes, distant hums, or melodies that start to form never fully resolve. This fragmented music mirrors the emotions of the characters. Grief that can't quite speak, attention that never fully releases. Now, a single piano key pressed in the basement isn't just a sound. It's memory, it's loss, it's the voice of the house itself. This approach to musical symbolism is shared by other media. Christopher Nolan's Interstellar uses Hans Zimmer's organ score to symbolize both awe and fear of the unknown. When the score swells in the ducking sequence or the Tesseract scene, it's not just music. It's the feeling of time, love, and desperation colliding. Similarly, the indie game Omori weaponizes quiet, lo-fi piano themes that fracture into dissonance during emotionally intense moments. The music isn't just there to be pretty. It reflects the inner world of characters, trapped in loss and vagueness. However, what makes Whitepine so powerful is how it weaponizes silence just as effectively as music. The absence of a score in crucial scenes becomes symbolic in itself. It's the sound of nothing changing, of time standing still, of a house and its people frozen. By the time music returns, it feels like the world is breathing again. And we, the audience, feel that breath in our chest. Rhythmic montage is a film editing technique that emphasizes the tempo and pacing of a sequence through the arrangement of shots. It uses the timing of cuts, the length of each shot, and the overall rhythm of editing to evoke emotional responses and create specific narrative flow. This technique can heighten drama, build tension or create a sense of movement in storytelling. And the best utilization of that can be well seen 8 minutes and 35 seconds into the episode 6 of Whitepine, where the soundtrack Mulberry, composed by Ivory herself, starts to play, instantly taking our breath away.
Come on, we can get you something warm to drink.
Maybe this was not just a music. In filmmaking terms, this sequence would be categorized as a music-synchronized montage, or fast-cut sequence, used to convey psychology, escalate tension, and propel narrative momentum. It's exactly the kind of music-driven, rhythmically matched editing that gives Whitepine many of its cinematic and emotional punch, even within its Minecraft framework. Hans Zimmer, known for his sweeping visceral scores, frequently describes film music as the heartbeat of a movie. Zimmer's work, appearing in a lot of Christopher Nolan's movies, describes it like a life or death situation, emphasizing that the timing, tone, and the pace of his score, often highly rhythmic and symbolic, helps to define the tone more than visuals can alone. Bernard Herrmann described music as what actors cannot say, and believed films were incomplete without it. He deliberately used music as a psychological character. Because of music, the frames seem to flicker and pulse into it, pulling you into a sudden storm of emotion. What felt like a slow, almost dreamlike show erupts into something otherworldly. A moment where sound and image collide, and a story stops feeling like a story and starts feeling like an experience. Across all forms of media, symbolism functions as the invisible engine that gives stories their lasting impact. It isn't always loud or obvious. It often works in quiet, persistent ways, shaping how we feel a story without us ever noticing why. Whitepine is proof of this. Its most unnerving and memorable moments aren't the scenes of tension or chaos, but the still ones. The piano key in the basement, the red scar that quietly spreads, the motionless windows staring into the woods. These elements stay with us because they mean more than they show. When we look at media as a whole, the works that resonate the longest are those that use symbols to bridge the gap between the narrative and the audience's inner world. In Whitepine, a single moment of silence or an empty frame can achieve the same effect. It makes the story echo in our mind long after the end of the frames. Instead of simply watching or listening, we begin participating. We construct meaning out of fragments. And in the act of interpretation, the story becomes ours. A hallway is no longer just a hallway. A scar is no longer just a scar for the sake of it. Ultimately, symbolism is what separates a story we simply watch from a story we carry with us. It transforms a quiet Minecraft series like Whitepine into a living, breathing work of cinema. One that lingers in our memory not just because of its scale, but because of the unspoken weight in every frame. In our playing side, whether it's a character representing various personalities, or a simple note escalating tension, or maybe even an angle that's slightly off the center, we know that there's a reward that can be found if searched with speculation for enough time and reason. And so, we return to the house at the edge of the woods. The roof still limps, the windows still watch, the gate still rusts in silence. Nothing has changed. But now, we've learned how to look. Whitepine doesn't end when the screen fades to black. It lingers, quiet but insistent, like a single key pressed in the night. And once you've heard it, some part of you will always keep listening.